So, I decided to combine my love of magic for another love of mine, weather. I'm actually a meteorology student in college. I've always loved weather since I was a little kid. And magic is the perfect way to express whatever, especially nerdy, passions you may have. So today, I'll be making a weather-themed commander deck. But where to start? My first thought was fog tribal, since fog is literally just a surface-level cloud. What could be more perfect than that? A quick EDH rec search said a lot. Turns out fog effects are more common than copies of the card Fog. This is going to be pretty difficult. This deck is going to have to be made in the Stone Age before EDH Rec was an easy way to have a deck list in like 5 minutes. And I'm going to have to find cards myself. Disgusting. However, I did find Kyanois, God of Storms, in my preliminary search, which is a great start because storms. So I did what any good commander player would do, ignore synergy completely and just find weather-related cards. Hint, Winter Orb definitely counts. I poured through my own collection, well actually that's kind of a lie, I looked in my binders in a long box of rares, and I poured through EDH Rec, starting with the saltiest cards because I'm a mean guy. Cyclonic Rift is on there and this deck might actually be decent? Immediately, I ran into a problem though. I can stretch, some might even say time stretch, almost any card to being weather related, so I have to set some ground rules. No stretching. Now I have to set some sky rules. No stretching. Done. As long as a card depicts a type of weather notably, it's basically good. So, as I started searching and going through my cards, I would see one card, like Weathered Wayfarer, and it would lead me to other cards, like Heliod, God of the Sun. Sidebar, the sun is the entire reason we have weather here on Earth, so I count that. But I also struggled, like, a lot. This is a meditation moment with Colin. Turns out this is sort of an insane idea, and my deck will probably have no synergy. But you know what? That's a problem for future me. I haven't gotten that far in the script yet. Well, I mean, I guess future me has. It's just the past me that hasn't. But the me that's reading this as a voiceover has. Because the deck clearly got made if you're watching this. My brain hurts back to magic cards. Slowly and surely, I started to find half-decent cards that have to do with weather, like Ether Gale and Atali Primal Storm, which are both some really powerful cards. I also found Tornado. It was at that time that I had a decision to make. Do I allow cards with the ability Storm? I thought about it quite a lot, and decided no, I don't. It just felt like a cop-out. So instead, I opted for some Rouse, since he has a weird affection for storms. Could not be me. I actually learned a lot of new things. Like for instance, Kolgin is actually every storm's fury. Turns out it's not energy from the atmosphere, instability, and a lot of other physics-related processes, but actually a goofy-odd dragon that makes storms dangerous. It was also around this time when I realized that I could have made my life really easy and just made a snow deck. So I looked into snow cards. Turned out I literally just lied to all of you. I'm sorry, the subscribe button is there to comfort you if I've hurt you. Certainly there are a couple, like Jorn, I don't even know what the pronunciation is there, God of the Winter, but besides that, Icebreaker Kraken isn't really a weather card, just a card that happens to exist near some ice. It didn't even harness ice, it just destroys it. If it was Ice Maker Kraken, I would need one in my house, because where does the ice go? Like, this is not even a joke. I'm hoping my family watches this, because guys, where does the ice go? So, Blizzard Brawl is certainly a fitting removal spell. I don't think every snow card is going to be the way to go, so on goes the journey. Journey I did, and after a very long time of searching for cards, I wound up with a solid list of 148 weather-themed cards, but now I just needed a commander. Kaikar, Calamax, or Imard would probably be the most on theme, but my concern with those commanders are they don't have access to all of the colors. In a weird way, I think we can make the most on-theme deck by allowing ourselves to play the most on-theme cards, which sounded weird in my head but is just a perfectly logical statement. For example, Kaikar would probably be the best deck playable-wise, but it doesn't have access to Wind Shear, Tornado, Squalline, Cyclone, or I am now realizing there was probably a weather enthusiast back at Wizards in the day. So forgive me, but I'm going to use Kyanois and Tiro of Meletis. It's in the right colors that we need, and the weather in question is a really good day. That's a weather condition. And man, is it beautiful in Theros on that day. It also prominently features the sun, which, as I said earlier, is the reason the Earth has weather in the first place. I'll admit, this is a stretch, but it's the biggest stretch card that I'm going to use. And if I want to make a half-decent deck, this is what I need to do. Now I've got this big list of cards. It's time to start trimming down and finding some alternate arts that feature weather, like Arcane Signet, with a little bit of lightning, but with more importantly a huge bank of clouds in the background. But back to deck building, step 1 is taking out some very bad cards, like Rainbow Efreet. I'm also taking out a couple of cards that are prohibitively expensive. Since I'm a weather nerd, I'd love to one day make this deck if I can, and a card like Acid Rain is just too expensive. Not to mention, there are some cards I cut because they were either too much of a stretch or in kind of poor taste, like Catastrophe. Others I really wanted to keep for the weather nerd factor, like Updraft Elemental, but a 1/4 for 3 mana in Commander is irrelevant at best, even though it flies. Winter Orb and Rising Waters would be a little bit too much for this deck because we don't have a great way to win the game when we shut things down, so although these cards are great stacks pieces, they don't really help us win in this deck, so I had to cut them. Once I did that, I cleaned up the deck, made it synergize a little bit, and get yourselves ready because here it is, a weather-themed Commander deck. Let's start with part 1, the ramp. How are we going to play things without mana? That's a trick question because of course we can't. So we play our Commander to ramp ourselves, but also a few other things. Captain Lannery Storm, who attacks and creates treasures. Sculptor of Winters, who taps into our snow-covered land theme by untapping our lands. Shizuko, Caller of Autumn, is going to give the appearance of a group hug deck, which this is in a sense. Really, the theme of this deck is just incremental value, and we can use a card like Upwelling to maximize this excess of mana from this card and our commander. Let's get back to other cards, like Arcane Signet and Sol Ring. These two arts here come in really clutch to help us out with a bit more of ramp. Part 2, card draw. Our commander draws us cards, so we're already starting off pretty good in this category, but we definitely could take some help. Ral, Caller of Storms, isn't exactly the best planeswalker that's ever been created, but hey, it's also not terrible, and given how goofy our deck is in terms of its theme, we don't get a lot of opportunities to turn down planeswalkers, especially those that draw cards and potentially remove on a really good day. We have a few others though, like Kyanois, God of Storms, which is no question so much better of a card, it's not even close. Storm Surge Kraken can theoretically draw us some cards, which is the same case as Xeris, the Rising Storm. What will most definitely draw us cards though is Whirlwind of Thought. We have 38 non-creature spells, including this one in our deck, so it should be drawing a decent number of cards. But that's actually it in the card draw section because we don't have a huge number of card draw cards to draw from. If you'll pardon the pun, that kind of flowed get me a contract right now. Part 3, game plan and win conditions. So the game plan with this deck is to sling spells and survive for long enough to resolve one of our game enders, like Comet Storm, which we can cast as a huge spell because of our commander ramping us so well. That's what it does. Also, we can copy that big spell to get the necessary damage to our opponents. Ral, Storm Conduit, and Calamax the Stormsire are two different ways that this can happen. But of course, we can't play an entire deck that relies on one game plan to win. We have to have some backups. Atali, the Primal Storm, is a great backup and a way to take our opponent's cards. Side note, we do use other weather words than Storm in this deck, but man is that a great one to play some pretty good cards with. Kaikar, Wind's Fury, is one such of these better named cards, and it's pretty good when we play 38 non-creature spells in the deck. And hey, it couples as ramp. But best case scenario, we can actually use this to play into the Comet Storm win con. The only drawback is we really don't get any amazing tutors in the deck because they don't reference the weather, which stinks, but our commander draws enough cards that just maybe we'll see this game winner. If not, Heliod the Sun God is also a pretty good mana funnel, as is Thassa, God of the Sea, and Thrasta's Tempest Roar is not the last one on the list, even though it is great, because I'm actually going to double back for a second to Comet Storm backups, because I lied a little bit. We do have backups, but they're dangerous, and they're also predicated on having more life, which isn't a terrible bet for a couple reasons. Stick with me. One, when you play Group Hug, you can leverage the benefits you give the table as a reason for people not to attack you, which you just have to be a little skilled at politics to do, but it's something you can learn as you play this deck. Additionally, our commander is a 2/8, which is a pretty good blocker. So, if you all are willing to come with me on this risky journey, and all of that works, and we do have more life, then Earthquake, Hurricane, or a Squall Line work as game enders. That makes in total 4 of these effects if all goes well. If not, maybe we can at least get a huge Shark Typhoon Shark that flies, which is a Sharknado. Part 4. Removal and board wipes. Things aren't always going to go our way all the time. We run a lot of board wipes besides the ones we already talked about in this deck, because typically those are weather themed. So let's name a few. Okay, class, let's go. Repeat after me. Arashi, the sky asunder. Cyclone Summoner. Thousand Winds. Tornado Elemental. Cyclonic Rift. Ether Spouts. Whelming Wave. Supreme Verdict. Storm's Wrath. We hit everything here as we should. We've got all our answers, and for a deck that just wants to stick around until it wins, I'm happy with this section. But there are plenty of times that we want to kill one thing and not everything. So how do we do that? With yet another class discussion, this time in the form of an exam. Let's hope you studied. This card has 2 words, the latter of which is the shape of DNA, and the former of which is something created when 2 opposite charges created by convection are equalized in an explosive moment. This card has a CMC of 2. Lightning Helix. One of the most influential cards of all time, this card is the first in the phrase, blank the bird. Lightning Bolt. Similar to the previous 2 cards, this card shares the first name, but the second word in the sequence is a popular spray-on deodorant brand. Lightning Axe. This 3 damage spell makes your opponents unable to attack this turn for the low cost of 3 mana. Intimidation Bolt. This 1 mana spell in a snow deck has the potential to be a Lightning Bolt clone, and is a snow instant. Frostbite. Now it's time for the sorcery round, which is a lightning round, pardon the pun. This 1 mana green snow sorcery from Kaldheim depicts a warrior fighting a massive bear. Blizzard Brawl. This lightning bolt at sorcery speed can be cloned by the victim and sent to another victim who has the same opportunity. Chain Lightning. This card's first name is the word that follows Sahara, and the second word is the title of a 1996 film starring Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton. Desert Twister. This is Lightning Bolt with Suspend. Rift Bolt. Thank you everyone for playing our game show today. You get to leave here with your very own copy of On Thin Ice, or the infamous Tornado, which may be a terrible removal card, but I have a soft spot for tornadoes. Part 5. Protection. Just in case everything that I already talked about goes south, we have a couple extra ways to keep ourselves alive. Fog, constant mists, weather the storm, smoke, and a card that I know isn't great but I still love it because, again, I'm a weather nerd, Stormfront, because it's one of those next level weather cards that I didn't expect to be in Magic, but I'm so happy it's here. But there are so many other cards in this deck. As long as this deck tech has been, it would have been a lot longer if I talked about all of them. If you want to see those cards, the deck list is in the description below, and I'm not lying about that this time. Also in there are all the fun lands I put together to make this deck tick, and those are all weather themed too, so get ready for a lot of things that are either flooded or Arctic. That's the video, but don't click away yet, because please subscribe before you do so if you appreciated the video. At the moment, I'm on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and every single click of that beautiful red button counts towards achieving my goal. I appreciate you all greatly, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching.